So again, while the baseline is equilibrating, we'll go ahead and build a sequence and then start the injections. So to do so, we're going to have to change back to the sequence monitor by going to View, change Acquisition Settings to Acquisition Sequence Mode, and now you'll notice that it goes back to Acquisition Sequence Monitor as opposed to Single Run Monitor. And we have our sequence table listed below. So let's build a sequence. To do so, we go to the Edit Acquisition Sequence, click on that, and we'll see a blank template of the sequence. Now, similar to the single injection, we'll simplify this table as we're not going to do any data analysis. Click on the Arrange Column button, and just like before, press the double arrow to the left. All of the data analysis options are now over on the left side and not shown, and all of the required information is on the right side. Click OK, and now our table has been simplified. Now, similar to when we're running a single injection, we have a sample number, which of course is your vial number. We have the injection volume, we have the name of the chromatogram, we have that acquisition time, and the control method. The only additional piece of information we enter in is the type. Now if we click in the first section there and the drop down, we see that our options are unknown or standards 1 through 10. Standards 1 through 10 are used when you're doing a calibration curve. If you are simply just running an unknown sample or a sample that is not part of a calibration curve, select unknown. Enter in our vial position, which again is number 1, our injection volume, which again is 20 microliters, and our chromatogram name. If we next pick our control method, again our acquisition time is going to need to be 0.2 minutes less than the control method time. Now as we're running a sequence, we'll put in more samples. There are multiple ways to do this. You can simply right click on the first column and copy. You can then right click on the second row and paste. Now the only requirement is that the sample chromatogram name is different. If we were to try to save this, it will warn us and say, column number 4, this chromatogram name cannot be duplicated. So simply put in another character, and now it would allow us to save. Now, as opposed to copying and pasting lines, we can also fill down particular columns. For instance, if we wanted to run 5 samples, we can click on the first line and drag down. Now if we right click, we can fit block the sample number. So if we are just repeating samples, we would start with vial position number 1 if that's where our first sample is, and if we increment by 0 and click OK, it repeats the sample 5 times. If we right click again, but we increment by 1, it will set it up to do samples 1 through 5. The same goes for all the rest of the columns. If we click volume, copy down, and right click, we enter in the injection volume for all those lines highlighted. We will come back to the chromatogram name in 1 second. The acquisition time, click, highlight down, enter in our time, click OK, and the control method as well. Now, for chromatogram name, let's go ahead and do the same. Highlight down, right click, and now we'll change this so that it's currently going to put the username, which we've logged in as user, followed by an underscore, the date, followed by an underscore, and an ID number, which is simply the number on the left side, which will be in 3 digits. So 001, followed by 002, and so on. A helpful way to change this is to change the first line to user defined, and now you can type in any sample name you would like. You can leave the date and the ID number after that. Once you click OK, you'll notice it names everything test sample, it puts in the date, and then again 001, 002, 003, so that no chromatogram name is the same. And the last thing is the type. If we highlight down and right click, we can simply say unknown for the first 5 lines, or 10 lines, or however many lines you're running in this sequence, and click OK. Now that we've built our sequence, we can go ahead and save it. Otherwise, one last way to fit the table is to click on the first line and copy down all 10 lines, or however many you want to run. Now if we right click, we can fit block, and instead of doing each column individually, we can do multiple columns all in one window. So the first one, the sample type, we say 10 lines for the unknown. We will start with number 1 and increment up by 1. We will inject 20 microliters for all of them. All of them will be 4.8 minutes. We next enter in the chromatogram name. They can all be called test sample with a date and an ID number. And then last, if we go to methods, we pick the control method. And once we've entered in the control method, we click OK, and you'll notice it fills the rest of the table in for us. So let's go ahead and save this. And as always with a sequence, we can just simply put the date as the sequence name. Now if this were a calibration sequence, or a sequence you're going to run continuously from day to day, you can name it something specific so you can open it at a later time, tomorrow or next week, and run the exact same sequence very quickly. But we'll leave it at this time as the date, and click Save. Now once we've saved that sequence, we can press Send to Acquisition Sequence Monitor, which is a shortcut button. And once we do that, you'll notice it fills in our table under the Sequence Monitor. And it has activated our Start button. Now we're ready to start. Once our system has equilibrated, click Start. Now once the injection has started, as you can see, it again starts the acquisition count. We have 0.4 minutes in of 5 minutes. And it fills in the rest of the sequence information. And in this case, as we're running a sequence, tells us we're currently on line number 1 of 10. We of course can go to the chromatogram and see what's coming out. There's our first peak. If we go back to the sequence, we see that the line that is currently running, number 1, has turned red, and all the sequential ones are green, meaning they are queued and will run in turn. At any time we can edit this sequence. For instance, if we simply just want to change the injection volume on line number 4, just simply click there and type in a new number. Now as you'll see, everything afterwards turned white and we have a star. That simply means you need to update the sequence when you're finished editing it. To do so, simply click Save Acquisition Sequence, and now you'll see it has changed that to 10 and everything is green again. You can of course right click on the line to insert or delete, so you can edit this table freely as you're running samples. We don't need to run 10 samples. We'll highlight the bottom 5 lines, right click and delete. Again, we just need to update. Now, if we're currently running number 1 and we have not yet put sample number 2 into the auto sampler, we can go ahead and click the pause button. Now that does not affect the current run, as it will continue to run this method just as it would had we not clicked the pause button. However, in this case, it will not go to line number 2 until we hit the continue button. So you can go ahead and prepare sample number 2, and when you've put it in the auto sampler, click the continue button. Now in our case, we're going to run sample number 1 again. And we can go ahead and delete the last 4 lines. Click Save, and again that's green. Now, the one restriction within the sequence is, as you'll see, once we've reached the last line of the sequence, we cannot edit the sequence at all. We'll have to wait till that last run finishes before we can. Now one additional thing we can do is change the in mode. So currently, it's going to continue pumping, the column oven will turn on, and the detector lamp will stay on. To change that, change the in mode, you can stop the pump, or you can hold the in conditions or the final conditions of the method. If you're leaving for the night, you'll obviously want to stop. You can turn the column oven off, and you can turn the lamp off if you like on the detector. Simply click OK. Once again, our line turns white. With a star, we simply need to update. As with the individual injections, we can stop the sequence at any time by clicking the stop button. It will of course warn us. In this case, we click no. We can stop the pumps, we can take spectra as we showed, and we can always auto zero, although again it will auto zero at the beginning of each injection. If we go back to our chromatogram, we see our separation is completed, yet we haven't reached the end of the method. We of course could let it finish, and it will of course go to the next line in the sequence. However, as a shortcut, we can hit the stop button, say yes, and it will save that data of course. And now if you'll notice in the sequence, that first line has finished and it's turned gray. If we hit the start button, it's going to go on to line number 2. If we were to hit reset, it would reset both lines to green, and we'd run line number 2 and number 1 again. However, let's go ahead and hit start. And what you'll notice is it now is running line number 2, as the gray means it finished line 1. And, as mentioned, since we are on the last line of this sequence, we will not be able to edit the sequence until this injection is finished. Now we'll let this injection occur, and we'll come back to show you how the pumps stop once this injection has completed. Now, as you'll see, we are nearing the completion of the second injection. Step number 2 has less than 30 seconds left. And you'll see that line, of course, is currently red as it is running. So, what we'll notice, of course, our separation looks very similar to before, or almost identical. And now that we're nearing the end, we'll see, of course, after this gets to 5 minutes, the pumps will turn off as our sequence says to stop. Sure enough, our system stopped, and we've ended our sequence and the pumps are no longer pumping. You can tell by the flow rate is 0, and our pressure, of course, comes down. At this point, you've finished running a sequence, and you've learned how to do a single injection. You're ready to move on to the data analysis side. Now the last thing to show you on the sequence is, once we've learned how to do some data analysis features, you'll be able to put those in and have the system automatically integrate, name peaks, and build calibration curves as the samples are running. Just quickly pointing those out, when you're building your sequence table, your peak ID method will be here, your calibration method will be here, and your data processing, which will integrate your peaks, will be located here. And thus, by entering those into the sequence, it will do all of the data analysis you'd like, so that when you return after the samples have finished, you can print out the report and you'll have all your information and analysis finished. Now, first you must of course learn about the peak ID, the calibration, and the data processing side of the software in order to enter those in correctly.